Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Stadium Stats. Today I'm going into the Week 16 schedule and predicting my winners and losers of every game. After that, I'll get into my Week 16 power rankings and ordering my teams from 1 to 10. So, without further ado, here we go. On Thursday Night Football, we've got a matchup between the New Orleans Saints and the Los Angeles Rams. The Saints are coming off a big win over the Giants in which they won 24-6. The Saints finally had a pretty good offensive performance. And I actually thought they were going to lose that game because the Giants had been on a hot streak. But the Saints finally performed pretty well. They are still completely in the race for that division. It seems to be mainly between them and the Buccaneers at this point. But the Saints are a decent enough football team. They have a chance still to win that division, as I just said. And they've been playing at a higher level recently of football. On the other hand, the Rams are coming off a win over the Commanders, in which at one point they were up really, really big. Then the Commanders had to rotate their quarterback. They benched Sam Howell and brought in Jacoby Brissett, and they actually almost caught back up to the Rams. The Rams' offense has been incredibly explosive as Cooper Kupp seems to be back from what he was dealing with earlier in the season. Puka Nacua continues to really impress, and Kyren Williams has been playing incredible. Honestly, he's been playing as one of the best running backs in the entire league lately. I do think the Rams' offense is going to be too much for the Saints to handle, and I think that this game could have heavy implications for who gets one of the wild card spots in the NFC. I think the Rams are a slightly better team, so I'm going to pick the Rams to win this one. Up next on Saturday, our first Saturday game is the Bengals versus the Steelers, divisional matchup. Bengals have been playing amazing football lately. Jake Browning continues to really, really impress. And they continue to win football games as they beat the Vikings last week in overtime. Unfortunately, Ja'Marr Chase did get injured in that game, but T. Higgins really stepped up in his place, and so did Tyler Boyd, and they ended up winning that game. Their offense looks really, really good, even without Joe Burrow, which is pretty impressive. The Steelers, on the other hand, have lost 3 straight. They've really, really underperformed. They benched Mitch Trubisky as Kenny Pickett is still not healthy. So they're starting Mason Rudolph, their third-string quarterback this week, as Mitch Trubisky has been playing horrible football. I don't really have much faith for this Steelers team. They looked like they were going to make the playoffs, and then they lost to the Cardinals and the Patriots in back-to-back weeks, and then lost again to the Colts this week. They started off that game up 13-0, and then let up 30 unanswered points and lost 30-13. Really, really poor performance. I'm going to pick the Bengals to win this one, as I think the Steelers are on a slump. Even though Kenny Pickett hasn't played that well this year, the loss of Kenny Pickett has really impacted this team. Up next on Saturday Night Football, we've got the Bills taking on the Chargers. The Bills coming off a major win over the Cowboys, in which Josh Allen didn't even have that good of a game, threw for less than 100 passing yards, but made no errors. But what the real star was their run game, as James Cook had over 200 scrimmage yards. They scored multiple touchdowns on the ground, and they demolished the Cowboys. I believe the score was 31-10. They played incredible football. They're completely back into the playoff race, as they went from a couple weeks ago having about a 15% chance to making the playoffs to about now a 70% chance. This is a team that nobody's going to want to play in the playoffs, as they are just really dominant, and ever since they fired their offensive coordinator, they appear to be a much better football team. The Chargers, on the other hand, coming off a horrible loss that I predicted was going to happen. I thought that Brandon Staley was going to get fired over that game. I didn't really think it was going to be as bad of a blowout loss, 63-20, as it was, because I didn't think that the Raiders were going to score that many points coming off a week in which they scored 0. However, I did have a feeling that Brandon Staley was going to be fired due to the Chargers having a terrible performance, and that's exactly what happened. They got blown out. Brandon Staley got fired the next day, which the Chargers season was over. Justin Herbert is out for season. They're not making the playoffs, so might as well get their head coach out of there, and everybody's wanted to be fired for forever. I don't think this game will be that close, although I do think the Chargers will be a bit improved as they will rally behind not having Brandon Staley as their head coach anymore, but I'm still going to pick the Bills to win this game. Up next, our first Sunday game is the Commanders taking on the Jets, and both of these teams have been really, really bad. The Jets just lost 30-0 to the Dolphins, and the Commanders ended up benching their starting quarterback, although they said that Sam Howell is going to start this week. That once Jacoby Brissett came in, that offense showed a lot more life. They actually almost came back, but they still ended up losing. The Commanders have a terrible defense. The Jets have a terrible offense. I really don't think this game will be very good, as both teams are really bad, but I think the Commanders I think it'll depend on what ends up happening at quarterback for the Jets, as Zach Wilson did leave the game with an injury. It's possible Aaron Rodgers actually plays in this game, as he has been medically cleared to play, although I think it's very unlikely he plays at this point, as they have been eliminated from the playoffs. I am going to pick, I think this one is up in the air again based on that quarterback position, but I am going to pick the Commanders, as I think they are slightly better than the Jets, but the Jets' defense might be too much for the Commanders to handle, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets ended up winning. Up next, we've got a divisional matchup between the Lions and the Vikings, and if the Lions win this game, they clinch the division. If the Vikings win, they would have to win out to take the division, but it's still possible for them to take the division from the Lions if they win this game. The Vikings are coming off an overtime loss to the Bengals, in which at one point they were leading 17-3 and ended up losing that game 27-24 in overtime. Their offense looked a little better without Josh Dobbs, as Nick Mullins played a lot better than Josh Dobbs had been lately. It was nice for them to have Justin Jefferson back, but the real star of the show was Jordan Addison, who had over 100 receiving yards. The Lions, on the other hand, absolutely demolished the Broncos 42-17. Sam Laporta had an amazing game. Jared Goff had 5 touchdowns and no turnovers. Just an all-around incredible offensive performance from the Lions. And their defense played pretty well, too, as they were able to hold the Broncos to only 17. I do think the Lions are a better team here. I do think that the Lions and Vikings will split their series this year, and they still have 2 games to play against each other. But I'm going to pick the Lions to win this one and clinch the NFC North. Up next, I've got the Browns taking on the Texans. The Browns coming off a very close win over the Chicago Bears, in which they almost lost on a Hail Mary. Ball landed in Darnell Mooney's hands, and he bounced it right into the Browns defender's hands for an interception that cost the Bears the game. The Bears were actually winning up until through the fourth quarter, and then the Browns came back and won. Joe Flacco did throw 3 interceptions, but he still, despite his turnovers, he still was able to lead a game-winning drive and played all around pretty well despite those turnovers. He still seems to be the answer at quarterback for them, and I'm sure they'll continue to roll with him as he gives them the best chance to win. The Texans, on the other hand, coming off a win over the Titans in overtime, even without C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins. Hopefully C.J. Stroud clears concussion protocols and plays in this upcoming game, and if he does, I think they have a very good chance to win. I think this game is too up in the air for me to predict, given when I'm recording this, it is not known yet whether C.J. Stroud will play or not. I think if C.J. Stroud plays, the Texans should be able to win, although it will be a close game. And if C.J. Stroud does not end up playing, especially if Nico Collins also doesn't play, I believe the Browns will win. Up next, I've got the Packers taking on the Panthers. The Panthers coming off their first win in a long time, second win on the season. They beat the Falcons 9-7 in a game where they scored 0 touchdowns, but they still ended up winning. Panthers are not a good football team, but Bryce Young showed a couple flashes in that game, had a good rush or 2, and ended up leading a game-winning drive. Although it was only on a field goal, he still led a long game-winning drive at the end of the game. Packers, on the other hand, are coming off another loss in which this time they lost to the Buccaneers 34-20. Baker Mayfield had a perfect passer rating, which was the first time a visiting quarterback had ever had a perfect passer rating in Lambeau Field. That Packers defense looked atrocious as they really could not stop the pass at all. And their run defense wasn't much better. I do still think the Packers are a better team than the Panthers, as the Packers still have a chance to make the playoffs. Panthers are arguably the worst team in football. So I am going to pick the Packers to win this. And the Packers desperately need to win this game. But the Panthers have looked a little bit improved in recent weeks. And the Packers have looked a lot worse lately. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Panthers somehow pulled it off. But I do think it's a pretty easy choice to pick the Packers in this game. Up next, I've got the Seahawks taking on the Titans. And as of me recording this, Monday Night Football has not happened yet. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with the Seahawks and the Eagles. But it appears that Geno Smith and Jalen Hurts are both questionable for this game. So who knows what will end up going on in that game. Seahawks desperately need a win in order to keep their playoff hopes alive, as they have lost a lot of their games lately. They have looked a lot better lately, and their games have been pretty close, but they do keep losing. The Titans, on the other hand, lost a game in overtime to the division rival Texans. They're officially eliminated from the playoffs, I believe. And while Will Levis does look relatively decent, he's showing a lot of flashes, and this team does have a lot of hope with him at quarterback. I don't think they're going to win very many games the rest of the season, and the Seahawks are a much better team who needs the wins a lot more, so I'm going to pick the Seahawks to win. Up next, our last noon game on Sunday is the Colts taking on the Falcons, and the Colts were down 13-0 to the Steelers and ended up scoring 30 unanswered points and winning the game 30-13. Their offense looks really good. Jonathan Taylor should be returning somewhat soon. They're currently in the playoff picture. Gardner Minshew's playing really well. Their run game looks really good. Michael Pittman did unfortunately get knocked out with a concussion. Hopefully he'll play in this game this Sunday because he adds a whole nother element to that passing game, as he's played amazing this year. The Falcons, on the other hand, scored one touchdown and lost a game to the one-win Panthers. They're not very good. Bijan Robinson played really poor. Their run game couldn't get going at all. Their pass game really couldn't either, which was reflected by them only having one touchdown the whole game and losing to the Panthers. I am going to pick the Colts to win this, as they are a very good football team, and the Falcons are barely still in the playoff race. The only reason they're still in it is because their division is so bad that anybody still has a chance to win that division besides the Panthers. So I am going to pick the Colts, as the Falcons are not a very good team. Up next, I've got the Jaguars taking on the Buccaneers to start the 3 o'clock window on Sunday. And this game, the Jaguars are coming off a terrible loss to the Ravens in primetime. They only scored 7 points the whole game. They're really missing Christian Kirk on offense. They just can't get going. Their defense is still letting up a lot of points, but I do think the Jaguars are a good team, but they have now lost 3 in a row. They're looking a lot more vulnerable, and they're actually no longer nearly as likely to win that division, as the Colts and Texans are right on their tail for that division title. The Buccaneers, on the other hand, Baker Mayfield coming off arguably the best game of his entire career. He had a perfect passer rating in Lambeau, first time that a visiting quarterback has ever had that. Chris Godwin had an incredible game. Mike Evans scored a touchdown. Rachaad White continues to play incredible at the running back position. And that defense, while it didn't look great, it didn't look nearly as vulnerable as it has most of the season. I am going to pick the Jaguars to get a bounce-back win here, as they really desperately need it to clinch their opportunity to make the playoffs. However, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucs are able to hold that momentum coming out of that last game and win, but I'm still going to pick the Jaguars to get a rebound win. Up next, I've got the Cowboys taking on the Dolphins, and this game should be amazing. Both teams have been able to beat up on really bad teams all season, but then aren't able to perform consistently against good teams. The Cowboys just proved that by losing to the Bills. The Dolphins just proved that they can beat up on bad teams by winning 30-0 against the Jets. Both of these teams have so much potential, especially on offense, and their defenses have been consistently improving throughout the season. That being said, I do think the Cowboys are a better team than the Dolphins, but the Dolphins can be more explosive than the Cowboys, especially on offense. If Tyreek Hill plays this game, which he didn't play last week, and they still were able to win 30-0, if Tyreek Hill plays, I think that gives the Dolphins a much, much better shot. If he doesn't play, I think it's pretty clear the Cowboys should win this game, although the Cowboys are coming off a big loss to the Bills. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Dolphins were able to get the best of them, but I am going to pick the Cowboys to win. Up next, we've got a battle of two less than stellar teams in the Cardinals and the Bears. The Cardinals are coming off a loss to the 49ers, which honestly is not that disappointing, as the 49ers are one of the best teams in football, if not the best team, and they were able to still put up 30 points against the 49ers, but their defense let up over 40 points to the 49ers. The Cardinals have looked much improved ever since Kyler Murray returned, but they are really lacking receiving weapons, especially at the wide receiver position. They're really heavily relying on their run game, which looked really good against the 49ers, and their passing game to the tight ends, especially Trey McBride, who has continued to improve throughout every game this season. The Bears, on the other hand, their defense has looked way better ever since trading for Montez Sweat halfway through the season, as he is now their leading pass rusher in sacks for both the Bears and the Commanders, as he has split this season in half for each of those teams. That effect that he has had since they traded for him has really improved the secondary as well, as they don't need to be covering for as long because there is a lot more pressure being developed by that pass rush. The Bears' defense has looked a lot better. Their offense has looked relatively decent under Justin Fields, although it has been underperforming in recent weeks on occasion, as they weren't able to score too many offensive points last week. But that defense continues to get a ton of interceptions, has gotten a lot in the last few weeks, and the Bears are a much improved team from where they were at the beginning of the year. I do think they're much better than the Cardinals still, so I am going to pick the Bears to win this game. Up next, on Sunday Night Football, we've got a matchup between the Patriots and the Broncos. The Patriots are coming off a loss to the Chiefs, in which they actually didn't look that bad. They were leading at halftime. Bailey Zappi had another game where he really performed well in the first half and just didn't do very much in the second half. They're still a very bad team, and there's a lot of holes on this team, especially on offense, but their defense continues to stay really relevant. The Broncos, on the other hand, are coming off a terrible loss to the Lions, in which they lost by 25 points. They let up 3 touchdowns to Sam Laporta, 5 touchdowns to Jared Goff, and just weren't able to force many turnovers. They didn't look like the Broncos that we had seen in recent weeks, although I do think they will be able to get a bounce-back game against a bad Patriots team. The Patriots defense might be a lot for the Broncos offense to handle, but I do think that the Broncos are still a much better team than the Patriots are. The Broncos need a win to stay in the playoff race, and I do think they'll get it here. Up next, on Monday afternoon football, as it is Christmas, and we have 3 games on Monday, Christmas Day. The first matchup is a divisional matchup between the Raiders and the Chiefs. The Raiders are coming off a huge win over the Chargers, in which they won 63-20. They were actually up by 42 points at half, 42-0. They won by so much that they got Brandon Staley fired from the Chargers. It was just an amazing performance, especially coming off a 0-point game to the Vikings, in which they lost 0-3. The Raiders looked so much improved. Aiden O'Connell looked really good. Their pass game looked great. Devontae Adams finally had a rebound game. Their run game looked good even without Josh Jacobs, and their defense looked amazing. On the other hand, the Chiefs barely won over the Patriots, although they did end up really clinching it by the end of the game. They were losing at halftime, but they came back in that second half. The Chiefs are not a consistent team. Their offensive weapons are really inconsistent, but Rashee Rice continues to play really well. Kadarius Toney did have another terrible play that could have cost them a game as he bobbled the ball and caused another interception. But besides him, that receiving core has shown a little bit of improvement as Justin Watson and Rashee Rice have continued to improve week in and week out. It is a bit disappointing to see that Travis Kelce has not played that well this second half of this season. But I do think the Chiefs are still a better team than the Raiders. They should end up getting this game pretty easily. But after last week, I wouldn't be too surprised if the Raiders were able to hold their own, at least for part of the game. Up next on Monday afternoon football, starting the 3 o'clock window, we've got another divisional matchup between the Giants and the Eagles. There's really not that much to be said about this game. As I said earlier, I haven't seen Monday Night Football as of the time of recording this, but the Eagles, I'm assuming, will end up beating the Seahawks, although if Jalen Hurts doesn't end up playing, I wouldn't be surprised if that ended up going the other way. The Eagles are still a really good football team. They desperately need to start winning some games. They're pretty appreciative that the Cowboys lost so badly to the Bills, as it puts them back in the hunt for that division title. The Giants, on the other hand, lost 6-24 to the Saints. The Tommy Cutlets, Tommy DeVito, amazing span. Well, I won't say it's over. He had a not nearly as good of a game against the Saints. He didn't throw for any touchdowns and just didn't look that good. But he isn't playing that bad. The Giants do look like a much better team than they did at the beginning of the season. That being said, the Eagles are a much better team, and they tend to destroy the Giants every time they play in these divisional matchups. So I'm going to pick the Eagles to win, and I don't think it'll be that close of a game. Finally, on Monday Night Football, I've got the Baltimore Ravens taking on the San Francisco 49ers, and this could be one of the best games of the entire season. It's the 1 seed in the NFC and the 49ers taking on the 1 seed in the AFC in the Ravens. Both of these teams are playing to clinch that 1 seed for their division, and while it doesn't fully guarantee it, whoever wins this game has a much better shot of clinching that 1 seed in their respective conferences. The Ravens and 49ers both coming off big wins. 49ers put up 42 points on the Cardinals, although their defense did let up almost 30 points from the Cardinals. That run defense did not look that good in that game, but their pass defense continues to really impress lately. Their pass rush also has looked really good, and they got multiple interceptions off of Kyler Murray. On offense, Christian McCaffrey had 3 touchdowns. He had over 150 total yards and just played incredible. Deebo Samuel had multiple touchdowns. Brock Purdy threw for 4 touchdowns. That offense looks unstoppable. Brock Purdy continues to lead the MVP race. The Ravens, on the other hand, beating the Jaguars in primetime. And it wasn't that close of a game as they won by 16, 23-7. That defense looks amazing. They only let up 7 points to the Jaguars. And that offense continues to really perform even without Mark Andrews, as he's missing the rest of the regular season with an injury. Isaiah Likely really stepping up in his place. OBJ and the rest of the receiving core has really stepped up as well. And the Ravens offense and defense both look amazing. That being said, I do think the 49ers are a slightly better team, but this game is going to be down to the wire. It could be a shootout. It could be a defensive showdown. You really don't know what you're going to expect from this game, as both teams have amazing offenses and defenses, but I think the 49ers offense is just slightly too much for the Ravens to handle, so I am going to pick the 49ers to win this one. Looking at my Week 16 power rankings, I'm going to start off with a few honorable mentions, and those would be the Houston Texans, who have a very good chance to make the playoffs. I just think that the Colts and the Jaguars are a little bit better in their division, so it's very hard to put all 3 of them on this list. And the other team that I want to mention is the Seattle Seahawks, who just beat the Eagles in primetime. They really have a lot worse of a chance to make the playoffs than they did a lot earlier in the season. They looked a lot better as well earlier in the season. They did just beat the Eagles. They do still have a chance to make the playoffs, and that's why those 2 are my honorable mentions. But heading into the list, number 10, I've got the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've looked a lot worse and lost 3 straight over the past couple weeks. However, they are still a very complete team when they're fully healthy. I do think that they can still win a playoff game or 2. and I do still think that they'll win their division and make the playoffs. Looking at number 9, though, I do have the Colts, as the Colts have been playing a lot better lately than the Jaguars. I do think the Jaguars are a better team when healthy, but they haven't been healthy lately. And the Colts have just been really impressive this year. No one expected anything from them this year, as they were really bad last year. But they've been playing really well. Their offense keeps putting up points. They've got a good receiving game and rushing game, and their defense is much improved from where it was last year. They also have one of the top O-lines in the league, so that's why the Colts are at number 9. In at number 8, I've got the Browns. Really close call against the Bears, but they did end up winning that game. They seem to be a lot better with Joe Flacco under center than they were before he arrived there. He seems to be giving this team the most hope to win. They keep winning games, and they have one of the best defenses in the league. So for that reason, they're in at number 8, should make the playoffs, although the Ravens should win that division. In at number 7, I've got the Bengals. The Bengals have been playing better and better every week since Jake Browning took over as the starter. He's looked actually really good. Even though Joe Burrow's hurt, they're still winning games. They have a decent chance to make the playoffs, and this is a team that nobody's going to want to play in the playoffs, even with Joe Burrow hurt, as they've just got a lot of really good weapons on offense. Their defense seems to be able to stop other teams and has a really good pass rush, and for that reason, the Bengals are in at number 7. But in at 6, I've got the Chiefs. They finally won a game after multiple losses in a row. Patrick Mahomes not having his best season, but he's still Patrick Mahomes. That offense is struggling a bit with receiver-wise. However, Rashee Rice keeps stepping up every game. They just lack a lot of experience in that receiver room, as their best receiver is a rookie in Rashee Rice. Travis Kelce hasn't looked nearly as good as he has in past years, but he is still Travis Kelce, so don't want to doubt him. And that defense has looked really, really good, although they did let up a decent amount of points to the Patriots in the first half, which was pretty disappointing for that defense. That defense typically is really good. In at number 5, I've got the Eagles. Have them over the Chiefs because they've got a little bit less inconsistency. They also beat the Chiefs a couple weeks back. However, that being said, they do still have some problems. They've lost 3 straight and are now in at the number 5 seed. They had their opportunity to take over the division back from Dallas this week after Dallas lost, but they lost as well. However, the teams they've lost to have all been really good in the 49ers, the Cowboys, and the Seahawks. They're all pretty tough opponents, especially the first 2. But the Eagles have definitely had some offensive and defensive struggles. They're definitely missing their coordinators that they lost from last year in Shane Steichen, especially, who went to the Colts to become their head coach. And overall, while this team is definitely struggling right now, I do think they'll rebound. They have a really easy end to the schedule, and they're still a really good team. In at number 4, I've got the Lions. Finally had the bounce-back game that they've been looking for after having lost to the Bears and Packers in back-to-back weeks. They beat a pretty decent opponent in the Denver Broncos, who had been winning a lot of games lately, were definitely in the playoff race, and they beat them by 3 scores. Very impressive performance. Their offense finally looked really good, put up a lot of points. Jared Goff threw for 5 touchdowns, finally didn't have any turnovers, and their run game has continued to impress throughout the entire season. Their defense looked a little bit better against the Broncos as well, and that's why they're in at number 4. In at 3, I've got the Buffalo Bills, and this is a huge jump for them. They've won multiple in a row. They've been beating good teams, including the Cowboys this week, and played the Eagles really close a few weeks back. They finally look like the Bills that we expected them to entering the season. They've looked like a totally different team since firing their offensive coordinator, which a lot of people expected was just a scapegoat move. However, it has really improved their team immensely. And this is a team that nobody's going to want to play in the playoffs, whether they're on the road or at home. But it really does seem like they're going to make the playoffs now after a doubtful chance a few weeks back. They keep winning games, and they're playing really well. Just beat the Cowboys really, really big. In at number 2, I've got the Ravens. They're definitely the best team in the AFC, although the Dolphins, who I didn't include on this list because of their inconsistencies and because of the fact that they did just throw a game to the Titans last week. They've definitely beaten up on bad teams, but before I can include them pretty high, I do want to see them beat a good team, in which they do play Dallas this week. That would be exactly the proof I would need to put them back on this list. Although I do feel like they are kind of deserving, so I'll give them an honorable mention as well. But regardless, the Ravens are the best team in the AFC. Dolphins are the only ones who have an even close record to the Ravens, and they've just beaten up on bad teams. The Ravens keep beating good teams as well. Just beat the Jaguars in prime time. Their offense looks really good. Their defense looks even better. Very few holes on this team. The only problem is they do keep suffering injuries, as they lost Mark Andrews a few weeks back. They just lost Keaton Mitchell, their rookie running back, this past week to an ACL tear. But if they can stay healthy, they're definitely the hardest team to stop in the AFC and one of the best teams in the league. And at number 1, I've got the San Francisco 49ers. They look like the most unstoppable team in the entire league. Their offense is putting up a ton of points. Christian McCaffrey, multiple touchdowns, 7 total against the Cardinals this year, which ties the all-time record versus a team in a season. And this offense looks incredible with McCaffrey and Debo, and then Ayuk and Kittle as well. Purdy throwing for 4 touchdowns and no interceptions again. He's leading the league in the MVP race. Their defense looks incredible. Keep getting interceptions. Keep turning the ball over. Although they did let up 30 points to the Cardinals, I don't think that was too concerning, as they were up big the entire game anyways. Their offense just looks unstoppable, and for that reason, they're in at number 1. Thank you guys so much for listening and tuning in this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll tune in with you guys next week. Thanks so much. See you guys.